Clara sat alone in her quiet living room, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the stillness. The walls seemed to close in, filled with memories of a life she no longer lived. Her husband's laughter, once the music of the house, had long faded. Now, only the silence echoed, amplifying her emptiness. Every day felt like a repetition of the last, an endless loop without color. Her mornings began with black coffee and newspapers she barely read. The headlines blurred into insignificance, overshadowed by the heaviness she carried. Sometimes, she stared at the front yard, watching neighbors bustle with life. She felt invisible among them, as though she existed outside of time. Her garden, once her pride, now grew wild and untended. The weeds mirrored her own inner chaos. At 57, Clara felt like her life had already been written, its final chapter closed. Retirement had come with promises of freedom, but delivered only loneliness. The routines she once clung to became meaningless. Her calendar, once filled with meetings and obligations, now remained blank. Even the simplest tasks felt monumental. Depression whispered that she was too old to start again. The evenings were the hardest. Stretching endlessly into the night, the television played shows she never really watched, filling space rather than entertaining. She longed for the warmth of companionship, yet recoiled from social gatherings. Friends invited her to outings, but she declined, too afraid of showing her fragility. The isolation became both her prison and her shield. Her daughter called occasionally, her voice filled with concern. Clara always insisted she was fine, though her voice betrayed her. In truth, she had forgotten what fine felt like. The weight of her own expectations pressed down on her shoulders. She questioned whether her best years were irretrievably behind her. The silence of the house answered with cruel certainty. Clara often walked through the hallways, brushing her hands against family photos. Smiling faces looked back at her, frozen in time. She remembered birthdays, vacations, and ordinary days that once felt so full. Now, those same memories pierced her heart like glass shards. Each picture reminded her of what she had lost, rather than what she still had. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind restless. Sleep came reluctantly, interrupted by waves of regret and longing. She replayed moments she wished she could change, conversations she wished she had. The past became her constant companion, while the future seemed like a locked door. She wondered if anyone her age truly found joy again. Sometimes, she opened her journal, its pages half empty, waiting for words. She would begin sentences, but leave them unfinished, too uncertain to continue. Her thoughts felt heavy, too tangled, too untangled. Writing once gave her clarity, but now it only reminded her of her confusion. The pen felt foreign in her hand, as though it belonged to someone else. Yet, buried under her despair, a faint longing persisted. She wanted to feel alive again, to breathe without heaviness. The idea seemed impossible, but the yearning refused to disappear. It was like a small flame hidden beneath ashes, fragile yet enduring. Clara didn't know how or when, but a part of her still hoped for change. And so, in the stillness of her quiet home, Clara waited. She waited for something she couldn't name, a spark that might awaken her. The silence weighed heavily, yet within it lay possibility. Life, though muted, still pulsed around her. She didn't yet realize that her new chapter was waiting just beyond the door. It was on a gray Tuesday afternoon when Clara's life shifted ever so slightly. She had forced herself outside, walking aimlessly through downtown streets. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of roasted coffee from nearby cafes. Her eyes wandered over shop windows, each one reflecting her weary face. Then, faintly, she heard something unexpected: music. The sound floated through the air, warm and inviting. A melody carried by violins and punctuated by rhythmic claps drifted from an open door. She slowed her pace, curiosity tugging at her steps. Ahead, a sign read "Silver Steps Dance Studio." People entered and exited, their faces alight with energy. Clara felt a strange pull she couldn't ignore. She stood at the entrance, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Through the window, she saw couples spinning gracefully across polished wooden floors. Their laughter filled the space, mingling with the lively music. Mirrors reflected movements, both elegant and awkward, but all radiated joy. Clara felt both awe and envy in equal measure. The music vibrated against her chest, awakening something long dormant. She remembered her younger self, twirling in the kitchen to radio tunes. Back then, she had danced without fear of judgment. Now, her feet felt heavy, her body stiff. Yet, she couldn't tear her gaze away from the dancers. For the first time in months, her heart beat faster. Mikkel, the instructor, noticed her lingering outside and waved warmly. His smile disarmed her hesitation. "Come in," he mouthed, gesturing toward the door. Clara hesitated, panic battling with curiosity. Finally, almost against her will, she stepped inside. The warmth of the room enveloped her, contrasting with the cold loneliness she carried. Inside, the scent of polished wood mixed with faint traces of perfume. Students laughed as they fumbled through steps, their imperfections celebrated. Clara felt out of place, but the welcoming energy softened her discomfort. Michael approached, his tone gentle. "First time?" he asked. Clara nodded, her voice caught in her throat. He explained that ballroom dancing wasn't about perfection, but connection. "It's about listening to the music and trusting yourself," he said. The words sank into her, though she wasn't sure she believed them. Still, something stirred inside her, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, she could try. For the first time in years, she considered a risk. Clara found herself signing a registration form, her hand trembling slightly. It felt reckless, impulsive, almost absurd. Yet, the act carried a strange thrill. She tucked the receipt into her purse, heart pounding as though she had leaped off a cliff. Doubts gnawed at her, but beneath them lay undeniable excitement. Walking home, Clara replayed the scene in her mind. The music still echoed in her ears, carrying her footsteps forward. She questioned what had come over her, this sudden courage. The fear remained, but it was no longer absolute. A new possibility lingered, fragile but real. For once, she had chosen something unknown. As she reached her front door, Clara paused. The silence of her home awaited her, heavy as ever. But this time, it felt slightly different, as though music still lingered in the air. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she sensed it mattered. For the first time in years, tomorrow didn't feel empty, it felt alive. The following week arrived faster than Clara expected, and with it came a storm of nerves. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blouse 3 times before deciding it didn't matter. Her palms were damp, her breath uneven. She debated canceling, her phone hovering in her hand. But then, she remembered the sound of the violins, and she went. The studio bustled with activity as she entered, her heart racing. Students gathered in pairs, chatting easily, their confidence evident. Clara shrank against the wall, uncertain where to stand. Michael spotted her and waved, his smile reassuring. He introduced her to the group, his voice carrying warmth that settled her nerves slightly. They began with basic steps, the rhythm of a simple waltz filling the air. Michael demonstrated, gliding effortlessly across the floor. Clara's first attempt was clumsy, her feet tangled, her arms stiff. Embarrassment rose like fire in her cheeks. She avoided the mirror, afraid of seeing herself stumble. But Michael's calm encouragement softened her shame. "Don't think of your feet," he said gently. "Think of the music." She tried again, her body rigid but determined. Each step felt like walking on thin ice, fragile and unstable. Still, she moved, refusing to stop. Around her, others laughed at their own mistakes, turning errors into joy. Slowly, Clara realized she wasn't the only one struggling. David, a tall man with kind eyes, offered to partner with her. His steps were steady, guiding hers with patience. Clara tripped once, nearly colliding with him, but he laughed kindly. "Happens to everyone," he reassured. The sound of his laughter eased her tension, reminding her this wasn't about judgment. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile as the class continued. Clara's movements grew a fraction smoother. She still stumbled, but she noticed brief moments of grace. The music began to seep into her, filling cracks she hadn't known were there. Her body resisted, but her spirit leaned forward. Something within her longed for more of these fleeting seconds of likeness. Popped into class. Clara's muscles ached, her back stiff from effort. Yet, alongside the soreness was a spark of pride. She had survived her first lesson. Clumsy as it was, the others clapped for one another, creating a sense of community. Clara joined in timidly, her heart lighter than when she had entered. Michael approached her, his words steady and encouraging. "You did well today. Progress is about showing up, not being perfect." Clara nodded, though she doubted him. Still, his faith in her planted a seed she couldn't ignore. For once, she felt noticed, not for her mistakes, but for her effort. Walking home, she replayed the class in her mind, both her stumbles and her triumphs. A quiet pride nestled in her chest, foreign yet welcome. She still felt clumsy, still questioned her place there. But something shifted. She had stepped into the unknown and survived. For Clara, that was no small victory. That night, she sat on her couch, sore but restless, the silence of her home pressed in, but beneath it, she heard faint echoes of violins. She closed her eyes, her lips curving in the faintest smile. For the first time in years, she went to bed, thinking of tomorrow not with dread, but with anticipation. The second class carried with it a new storm of nerves. Clara arrived early, hoping to settle before the others came. The studio smelled of polished wood and faint perfume, familiar now but still intimidating. She stretched awkwardly in the corner, pretending confidence. Her heart beat erratically, warning her that she didn't belong. Yet, she stayed. As the class began, Michael introduced more complex steps. Couples moved in circles, the air filled with laughter and concentration. Clara tried to follow, her body resisting the rhythm. Her feet tangled, her balance faltered. She reached for David's hand but missed, stumbling forward. In an instant, she fell, the sound echoing through the room. Silence followed, sharp and suffocating. Clara's face burned, her chest tight with humiliation. She scrambled to stand, her hands trembling. Whispers swirled at the edges of the room, though she couldn't tell if they were real or imagined. The familiar voice of her depression whispered, "You don't belong here. You're too old, too weak." Michael rushed to her side, steadying her with calm hands. "It's all right, Clara," he said softly, his eyes steady. "Falling is part of learning." But the words barely touched her shame. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, magnifying every detail. She wanted to disappear, to run from the room and never return. David, still at her side, leaned in with a smile. "You should see me last week. I tripped so hard I nearly took Michael down with me." His humor cracked through her humiliation, earning a small laugh she didn't expect. The room's tension eased, replaced by light chuckles from others. Clara's shame softened, though not completely. The class resumed, but Clara's confidence wavered. Every step felt heavier, her movements tighter. Controlled by fear of falling again, she avoided the mirrors, unable to face her reflection. Still, she pushed forward, clinging to Michael's earlier words. If falling was part of learning, maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe she could endure. By the end of class, Clara was exhausted, her body drained from both effort and shame. She collected her things quickly, avoiding eye contact, but Michael stopped her at the door. "The fact that you stayed," he said, "that's the real progress. Most people would have walked out." His words lingered, cutting through the fog of doubt. Walking home, Clara's mind replayed the fall, her humiliation sharp as glass. But intertwined with it were Michael's words and David's laughter. A war brewed inside her, shame pulling her backward, hope urging her forward. She didn't know which would win, but she knew the battle had begun. That night, Clara sat by her window, the city lights flickering beyond. Her body ached, but deeper still was the ache of doubt. She questioned if she had the strength to continue. Yet, when she closed her eyes, she remembered the laughter, the kindness, the music. A whisper told her to try again. And so, though fear still gripped her, Clara resolved to return. The thought scared her, but it also carried a strange thrill. She had fallen, yes, but she hadn't been broken. Tomorrow, she would rise, and perhaps she would dance again. The third class arrived, and Clara entered the studio with cautious steps. The memory of her fall still lingered, heavy on her shoulders. She scanned the room, ready for whispers or pity, but instead, she found smiles. David waved from across the floor, his gesture simple yet reassuring. Something inside her eased, just a little. Michael paired students up, and once again, Clara found herself with David. His presence felt steady, like an anchor in stormy waters, ready to fall again. He teased lightly, his eyes kind. She chuckled, surprising herself with the sound. The tension in her chest loosened as the music began. This time, she allowed herself to trust David's guidance. His steps were firm, his rhythm consistent. When she faltered, he adjusted smoothly, never letting her collapse. Clara realized she didn't need to carry everything alone, at least not on the dance floor. The thought was both foreign and liberating. As the class continued, Clara noticed laughter bubbling more easily around her. She wasn't the only one stumbling. Mistakes echoed across the room. Each misstep became part of the rhythm, a collective dance of imperfection. She began to see that failure wasn't shameful, it was shared, softened by community. During a short break, David offered her water and shared pieces of his own story. He was widowed too, navigating loneliness in his own way. The admission struck Clara deeply. Their struggles overlapped in silent ways. She felt less isolated, as though her pain wasn't a private burden anymore. When class resumed, Clara approached the floor with newfound courage. She let the music carry her rather than focusing solely on her feet. Though still clumsy, she noticed moments where her movements aligned, fleeting glimpses of grace. Each one lit a spark of hope inside her chest. Michael praised the group for their persistence, reminding them that growth took time. His words, though general, felt directed at Clara. She absorbed them like sunlight after a long winter. The shadows of doubt hadn't vanished, but they no longer ruled completely. A fragile confidence began to take root. By the end of class, Clara was tired but not defeated. She lingered, chatting briefly with David and Elaine, who had come to watch. Their encouragement wrapped around her like a safety net. For the first time, she didn't rush to escape the studio. She wanted to stay in the warmth a little longer. Walking home, she replayed the evening in her mind, but the fall no longer dominated her thoughts. Instead, she remembered the laughter, the music, and the steady hand that guided her. For once, her memories didn't sting, they soothed. She realized she was beginning to change, step by shaky step. That night, Clara wrote in her journal again. The words didn't come easily, but they came. She wrote about the music, the people, the feeling of connection. For the first time in years, she filled an entire page. Closing the book, she smiled faintly, whispering, "Maybe I can still learn." Clara's optimism carried her into the next week, but doubt soon returned. At home, she tried practicing steps alone in her living room. Without music or a partner, her movements felt stiff and mechanical. She stumbled repeatedly, frustration bubbling inside her. Each mistake became a reminder of her inadequacy. She faced the mirror, but the reflection felt cruel. Her posture was awkward, her arms too rigid, her rhythm non-existent. The woman staring back at her looked tired, too old to be dancing. Tears welled up as the familiar voice of depression whispered, "This isn't who you are anymore." Clara closed the curtains, ashamed even though no one was watching. She sank onto the couch, her chest heavy with disappointment. The spark she had felt in class seemed to fade in the isolation of her home. Doubt wrapped itself around her, suffocating the fragile hope she had begun to nurture. Still, she couldn't let go completely. She replayed Michael's words about persistence and David's laughter when she stumbled. Those moments clung to her, refusing to vanish. She realized she needed the studio, the people, the music. Alone, the silence was too loud, her demons too strong. The next class loomed, and Clara hesitated at the door once again. The memory of her failed practice lingered, pressing her down, but stepping into the studio, she was met with warmth. The chatter, the music, the laughter, it all reminded her she wasn't alone here. For once, she felt relief walking in. Laughter began with a new rhythm, faster and more demanding. Clara's feet stumbled, her body struggling to keep pace. Frustration flared, but then she heard others laughing at their mistakes. Slowly, she joined in, her laughter shaky but real. In that moment, failure felt less like shame and more like growth. David noticed her struggle and offered encouragement. "Don't fight the music, let it carry you." His words echoed in her chest. She tried again, loosening her grip on control. For a fleeting moment, the rhythm flowed through her, lifting her spirit above the weight of her fears. Class ended with applause, the group cheering for one another. Clara clapped too, the sound echoing like a celebration of resilience. She realized the studio wasn't just about dance, it was about connection, about choosing joy despite the stumbles. For once, she walked home lighter than she arrived. Back at home, Clara faced the mirror again. The reflection hadn't changed much. Her movements were still clumsy, her body still stiff. But this time, she smiled at her own awkwardness. She realized the mirror wasn't the judge, it was just glass. What mattered was how she felt inside. That night, she wrote again in her journal, her words firmer than before. "I am learning," she scribbled, "not just steps, but something bigger, maybe myself." She closed the book, feeling a small but steady flame inside her. Doubts still lingered, but hope burned brighter. Elaine arrived at Clara's door one Saturday afternoon, holding a basket of muffins. The longtime friend had grown worried about Clara's isolation. "You've been hiding from the world too long," Elaine said warmly. Clara smiled faintly, touched by the gesture but unsure what to say. Friendship felt like a bridge she had almost forgotten how to cross. They sat in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh muffins filling the air. Elaine listened patiently as Clara spoke of the dance classes. She confessed her fear of failure, her fall, and her doubts. To her surprise, Elaine didn't laugh or scold her. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. "Clara, you're braver than you think. Elaine's encouragement struck deeply, more powerful than she expected. Clara realized how much she had missed the comfort of shared conversations. The walls she had built around herself began to loosen. For the first time, she admitted aloud that she wanted to keep dancing, saying it felt like releasing a secret into the air. Later that evening, Elaine joined her at the studio, sitting quietly in the back. Clara felt both nervous and supported, knowing her friend was watching. Michael introduced new steps, more intricate, demanding focus and trust. Clara's body tensed, but when she looked at Elaine, she saw nothing but pride reflected back. Her movements grew steadier, her laughter more frequent. Every stumble felt less painful under Elaine's gaze. Clara realized she had been denying herself the strength that came from leaning on others. She didn't have to face this alone. Friendship could be the rhythm beneath her feet. The thought filled her with courage. After class, Elaine hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, and Clara's heart swelled. She hadn't felt such warmth in years. The simple affirmation lit a fire inside her, small but enduring. Clara began to wonder if she had underestimated her own resilience all along. Walking home, Clara thought about how easily she had pushed people away. Depression had convinced her to live in silence, but friendship had the power to break through. She realized Elaine's presence reminded her of her own worth. The dance floor wasn't her only lifeline. People were, too. That night, she wrote in her journal about Elaine. She described her friend's unwavering support, the way her laughter softened heavy moments. For the first time, Clara didn't write about loneliness. She wrote about gratitude, about connection. The words flowed like music across the page, healing in their rhythm. Clara understood that friendship was as vital as the dance itself. Without Elaine, she might have surrendered to shame and doubt. But with her, she felt steadier, more willing to risk imperfection. Friendship became the unseen partner, guiding her through uncertainty. And that, she realized, was a dance of its own. As she closed her journal, Clara whispered into the quiet room, "I'm not alone." For the first time, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a pause between songs, waiting for the music to rise again. And she knew she would be ready when it did. Clara entered the studio the next week with a lighter heart. The music began, filling the room with lively rhythms. For the first time, she didn't overthink every movement. Instead, she allowed the melody to guide her steps. The violins, the piano, the beat, they wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the music in her chest rather than counting steps. Her body still stumbled, but the mistakes mattered less. For fleeting moments, she felt aligned, as though the song flowed through her veins. It was the closest she had come to freedom in years. Michael noticed her shift and smiled knowingly. "That's it," he encouraged. "Don't chase the steps, let the music carry you." His words resonated deeply. Clara realized dancing wasn't about escaping mistakes. It was about finding joy in spite of them. For once, she felt herself moving not against life, but with it. David, dancing beside her, leaned closer and whispered, "You're glowing tonight." Clara blushed, laughter bubbling out of her unexpectedly. She hadn't felt beautiful in years, yet in that moment, she did. The dance floor reflected not her flaws, but her courage. She realized beauty wasn't perfection, it was presence. The group clapped at the end of the song, the room buzzing with shared energy. Clara's chest swelled with pride, a warmth spreading where sorrow used to live. She looked around at faces smiling, voices laughing, bodies moving in unison. It was more than a class, it was a community, alive with connection. During a short break, Clara sat by the mirrors, her reflection different this time. She still saw lines of age, the stiffness in her body, but she also saw light in her eyes. Hope flickered there, undeniable. She whispered to herself, "I'm healing," surprised at the truth in her own words. As class resumed, Clara danced with renewed intention. Every step became a declaration, every turn a rebellion against despair. She realized the music wasn't fixing her, it was awakening what had been asleep. Joy, resilience, possibility, they had always been inside her. The music simply reminded her where to look. By the end of the night, her muscles ached, but her spirit soared. Clara lingered, reluctant to let go of the music. Michael noticed and said softly, "The best dancers are the ones who find themselves in the rhythm. You're beginning to do that." Her eyes glistened at the affirmation. Walking home, Clara hummed the melody under her breath, her steps lighter than before. The city lights twinkled around her, as if the world was subtly in tune with her newfound rhythm. The night air carried a sense of promise she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow no longer felt daunting, it felt like an invitation. At home, she wrote again in her journal, her hand steady and swift. "The music heals," she wrote, "not because it changes the world, but because it changes me." Closing the book, she felt certain of one truth. She wasn't just learning to dance, she was learning to live again. The studio was alive with chatter as the group gathered for another class. Clara arrived with cautious optimism, her steps lighter than before. She had begun to look forward to these evenings, the music echoing in her mind long after she returned home. Tonight, though, a storm awaited her. The lesson introduced a faster rhythm, demanding sharp turns and quicker coordination. Clara struggled, her body lagging behind the tempo. Sweat dampened her brow as she tried to keep up, determination in every breath. Still, her movements faltered, drawing attention she hadn't wanted. Her old insecurities stirred. One younger student, elegant and confident, sighed audibly as Clara stumbled yet again. "You're slowing everyone down," she muttered, just loud enough for others to hear. The words pierced through Clara like a blade. Her face flushed hot, and shame swelled in her chest. She wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. Michael intervened quickly, redirecting the class with calm authority. Yet the damage was done. Clara's hands shook, her steps even more unsteady. The laughter around her no longer felt shared, it felt sharp, like whispers behind her back. The voice of doubt returned, cruel and relentless. "You don't belong here." During a short break, Clara retreated to the corner, her chest tight. She considered leaving, her bag already in her hand. But then David appeared, his expression firm. "Ignore her," he said softly. "She doesn't see your strength, but I do." His words settled over her like a protective shield. Michael, too, approached, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Every dancer begins somewhere," he reminded her. "What matters is that you're here." Clara wanted to believe him, but the sting of the student's words lingered. For a moment, she felt herself standing at a crossroads. The music resumed, and Clara forced herself back onto the floor. Her steps were clumsy, her rhythm broken, but she refused to quit. Each turn became an act of defiance against the voice that told her she wasn't enough. Her body trembled, but her resolve deepened. She stayed. The class ended with applause, but Clara's smile was fragile. She thanked Michael and David quietly before slipping out. On the walk home, tears blurred her vision. She replayed the harsh words again and again, unable to silence them. Doubt pressed heavily, threatening to undo all her progress. Back at home, she sat by the window, the night pressing in around her. She wondered if she had made a mistake in joining the class. Yet, beneath the pain, another truth stirred. She had not left. Despite humiliation, she had stayed. That resilience, however fragile, was a victory of its own. Clara closed her journal without writing that night. Her hands shook too much, her heart too raw. But as she lay in bed, she whispered to herself, "I'll try again." The words felt weak, but they were still a promise. Tomorrow, she decided, would not be the end. The next evening, Clara nearly skipped class. Fear twisted inside her, whispering that more humiliation awaited. But she forced herself to go, her feet heavy as she walked to the studio. The thought of quitting gnawed at her, but the idea of surrendering felt worse. She needed to know if hope still lingered. The studio greeted her with warmth as always, but Clara's eyes darted to the younger student who had wounded her. The woman's dismissive glance reignited her shame. Clara lowered her head, wishing to disappear. Yet, David caught her eye and offered a nod of reassurance. She clung to it like a lifeline. During practice, Clara stumbled again, her rhythm faltering. Frustration welled up, threatening to spill over. But then Michael paused the music and spoke to the group. "We all carry struggles into this room," he said softly. "For me, dance wasn't just a skill, it was survival." His voice trembled, slightly with the weight of truth. He shared his story openly, admitting that he had once battled depression. Dance had been his anchor, the rhythm that kept him afloat when everything else threatened to drown him. Clara's breath caught. His words mirrored her own pain. For the first time, she saw him not as a flawless instructor, but as a survivor. The room was quiet, the students listening intently. Clara felt something shift inside her, the shame softening into understanding. If Michael could find healing through dance, perhaps she could too. His vulnerability opened a door she hadn't realized she was afraid to step through. She wasn't alone in her darkness. After class, David walked her home. Along the way, he confessed that loneliness had haunted him since losing his wife. "The dance floor helps," he admitted. "It gives me something to hold on to." His honesty resonated, echoing her own hidden wounds. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like the weakest one. Their conversation stretched into the night, filled with stories of loss and resilience. Clara realized that pain, when shared, felt lighter. The walls she had built around herself cracked further, letting connections seep in. She understood then that healing wasn't only about movement, it was about community. Back home, Clara opened her journal again, her pen steady. She wrote about Michael's confession, David's honesty, and her own fragile hope. The words flowed easily, no longer weighed down by shame. She filled 2 pages before stopping, her heart lighter with every sentence. She ended her entry with one simple line: "I am not alone in this." For the first time in years, she believed it. The dance floor wasn't just teaching her steps, it was teaching her truth. And that truth was powerful enough to silence the shadows. As she closed her journal, Clara felt the faint stirrings of joy. It wasn't overwhelming, not yet, but it was real. She realized healing wouldn't come all at once. It would come in steps, in shared moments, in the courage to keep showing up, and she was ready to keep dancing. The following week, Clara entered the studio with a quiet determination. The sting of criticism still lingered, but Michael's and David's words had planted strength inside her. Tonight, she promised herself, she would not let shame decide for her. She adjusted her scarf, lifted her chin, and stepped onto the floor. The music began, filling the room with energy. Clara focused on the rhythm, letting David's guidance steady her steps. For once, she didn't glance at the younger student who had mocked her. She looked only at the mirror ahead, determined to see herself differently. Each turn became an act of courage. Halfway through the class, Clara stumbled slightly, her foot dragging. The same student rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath. But before Clara could shrink into herself, David spoke firmly. "She's doing just fine. Focus on your own steps." The room stilled for a moment, then moved on, the tension broken. Clara's chest tightened, but not with shame, with gratitude. David's defense felt like a shield, protecting her from the barbs of doubt. She realized then that community wasn't just about dancing together, it was about lifting one another up. For the first time, she felt truly part of the group. As class continued, her movements grew steadier, more assured. She wasn't flawless, but she no longer feared imperfection. Each misstep became part of the rhythm, softened by the laughter of those around her. She realized that unity was more powerful than isolation, and it gave her strength. Michael praised her at the end of the night, his words simple but sincere. "You've come a long way, Clara," he said. She blushed, unused to such recognition. The younger student avoided her eyes, but Clara no longer cared. Her worth wasn't measured by others' judgments, it was measured by her courage to stay. Walking home, Clara and David shared quiet conversation. He spoke of his late wife with tenderness, and Clara listened with empathy. In turn, she spoke of her own losses, the emptiness that had haunted her. Their stories wove together, creating a bond stronger than silence. Healing, she realized, could be shared. At home, Clara opened her journal once more. She wrote about unity, about how strength multiplied when people stood together. The words came easily, her sentences lighter than before. She ended her entry with, "Tonight, I felt part of something bigger than myself." It was a truth she could no longer deny. As she closed the book, she looked at her reflection in the darkened window. Her face was lined, her body imperfect, but her spirit shone brighter than it had in years. For the first time, she didn't just see a woman surviving, she saw a woman growing. The realization warmed her deeply. That night, Clara slept soundly, the rhythm of the music lingering in her dreams. She dreamt of twirling under soft lights, surrounded by laughter and support. In her sleep, she smiled, the shadows of doubt momentarily silenced. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she rested in unity. Weeks passed, and Clara's confidence grew with each class. Then, one evening, Michael announced an upcoming community performance. The studio would showcase their progress, inviting families and neighbors to watch. The room erupted with excitement, but Clara's heart sank. The thought of dancing on a stage filled her with dread. Her chest tightened at the idea of eyes watching her every step. She imagined stumbling, falling, becoming a spectacle of failure. Fear gripped her so tightly that her hand shook. She wanted to protest, to say she wasn't ready, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile she didn't feel. Later, David noticed her unease. "You're scared," aren't you?" he asked gently. Clara nodded, unable to deny it. "So am I," he admitted, surprising her. His vulnerability softened her fear. "We'll get through it together," he promised. His words became an anchor against the storm in her chest. As rehearsals began, Clara's anxiety grew. The choreography was faster, the movements sharper. She stumbled repeatedly, her old fears resurfacing with every mistake. Michael reassured her that nerves were natural, but his words barely reached her. Each practice left her drained, her spirit trembling on the edge of retreat. At home, she practiced before the mirror, her body tensed with worry. The silence of her living room amplified her doubts. She pictured the audience, the bright lights, the judgment. Yet, beneath the fear, a quiet determination stirred. She remembered how far she had already come. Could she really give up now? Elaine visited, bringing tea and her unwavering support. Clara confessed her fears, her voice breaking. Elaine squeezed her hand firmly. "Fear means you're alive, Clara. It means you care. Don't let it stop. You'll let it guide you." The words lingered, reshaping her perspective. Fear wasn't an enemy. It was proof of her courage. Back at the studio, rehearsals intensified. Clara still faltered, but she forced herself to keep going. Each stumble became a rehearsal not just for dance, but for resilience. Slowly, she began to see the stage not as a threat, but as a challenge worth facing. Her fear remained, but it no longer controlled her. The night before the performance, Clara sat with her journal open. She wrote about fear, how it had ruled her life for too long. But now, she saw it differently. "Tomorrow, I will be afraid," she wrote, "but I will dance anyway." The sentence pulsed with strength she hadn't known she possessed. She closed the journal and looked out the window at the city lights. They shimmered like tiny stars, reminding her that she wasn't small or invisible. She was part of something bigger, something alive. Tomorrow, she would step onto that stage, not as a victim of fear, but as a testament to survival. As she lay in bed, Clara's heart pounded with anticipation. She didn't know if she would succeed, if her steps would hold steady, but one truth anchored her. She had come too far to turn back now. Tomorrow, she would face the stage on herself. The night of the performance arrived with a weight Clara could hardly bear. Backstage, the air buzzed with nervous energy, laughter, and whispered encouragements. Costumes shimmered under the lights, and the faint scent of hairspray and polished wood filled the room. Clara stood in the corner, her hands trembling, her chest tight with fear. She adjusted her simple dress, chosen for comfort rather than flair. Around her, younger dancers sparkled with confidence. Clara felt small, invisible, as though she didn't belong among them. The thought of stepping onto the stage made her stomach twist. For a fleeting moment, she considered fleeing. But then David appeared, his presence steady as always. "You'll be fine," he whispered, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just remember, it's not about perfection. It's about feeling the music." His calm voice anchored her storm. Clara nodded, though her heart still raced wildly. The curtain lifted, and the bright lights washed over the stage. The audience blurred into a sea of faces, their eyes all fixed on the dancers. Clara's pulse quickened as the music began, her feet frozen for a heartbeat too long. Panic clawed at her chest. She was about to falter. Then she remembered Michael's words, "Don't chase the steps, let the music carry you." She inhaled deeply, letting the melody settle into her bones. Her feet moved, shaky at first, but then steadying. David guided her with patience, and the rhythm began to flow through her veins. Midway through the routine, Clara nearly lost her balance on a turn. Fear surged, threatening to unravel her composure. But instead of retreating, she laughed a light, unexpected laugh that surprised even her. The sound freed her, dissolving the weight of expectation. She moved again, lighter this time. The audience clapped along, their energy feeding hers. Clara forgot the fear, the doubt, the judgment. She focused only on the music, the connection, the freedom of moving without chains. For the first time, she wasn't surviving the dance, she was living it. Her spirits soared with every step. By the final note, Clara stood breathless, her chest heaving, her cheeks flushed. Applause erupted, echoing through the auditorium like thunder. She bowed, tears pricking her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization of what she had just done. She hadn't been perfect, but she had been brave. As she stepped off stage, Elaine rushed forward, her eyes glistening with pride. "You were beautiful," she whispered, hugging her tightly. Clara's heart swelled, her fear replaced by triumph. She realized the performance hadn't been about the audience at all, it had been about reclaiming herself. That night, Clara wrote in her journal with steady hands. I danced on stage, she wrote. I was afraid, but I did it anyway. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. The words shimmered with truth. She had crossed the threshold from which there was no return. The days after the performance were unlike any Clara had known in years. Everywhere she went, she carried the memory of that night like a flame inside her. The applause still echoed in her ears, but more than that, the courage remained in her chest. She had faced the stage and herself. At the next class, Michael greeted her with a proud smile. You found the music, he said simply. Clara laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. She felt transformed, not because of perfection, but because of presence. The music no longer frightened her, it invited her. Her movements were freer now, lighter, more fluid. She didn't worry as much about stumbles or missed steps. Instead, she surrendered to the rhythm, letting it guide her. Each class became less about learning and more about living. She realized that the dance had never been about skill, it had been about rediscovery. David noticed the change too. You're different, he said one evening. Watching her smile easily, Clara nodded, acknowledging the truth. I think I finally stopped dancing against myself, she replied softly. Their laughter mingled, warm and familiar. The dance floor had become more than practice. It had become sanctuary. Clara began to look forward to the future again. She heard of an upcoming dance festival in a neighboring city, and the idea stirred excitement. Once, she would have dismissed it as impossible. Now, she saw it as an opportunity, a new horizon waiting to be explored. The thought thrilled her. Elaine supported her with unwavering pride. I haven't seen you like this in years, she said, her eyes shining. Clara realized she had given not only herself a gift, but also her loved ones. Her transformation was a ripple, touching the lives around her. She was becoming a source of inspiration. One evening, after class, Clara stood before the studio mirror. This time, she didn't see her flaws first. She saw her strength, her resilience, her light. The woman reflected back wasn't broken or invisible. She was alive, vibrant, and ready to embrace what tomorrow held. Back home, Clara wrote her longest journal entry yet. She filled pages with gratitude for the music, the friends, the courage to try. She ended with a single line that captured her journey. I am dancing with tomorrow. The phrase felt like a promise, a declaration of hope. As she closed the journal, she looked out her window at the night sky. The stars seemed brighter, the air lighter, the silence gentler. Life hadn't magically become easy, but it had become possible again. Clara understood now that joy wasn't something lost forever, it was something rediscovered. Step by step, she turned off the lights, her heart calm and full. Tomorrow awaited, uncertain yet inviting, and this time, she wouldn't shrink back in fear. She would step forward, one rhythm at a time, ready to dance with all that life still had to offer. Clara woke early, the morning light slipping gently through the curtains. For years, silence had been her prison, but today it felt like a pause in music. She poured coffee, opened her journal, and stared at the blank page. Her pen moved with certainty. The journey didn't end on stage, it began there. A quiet smile formed on her lips. On the kitchen table lay a folded flyer Elaine had given her. It announced the River City Dance Festival, filled with workshops and performances. Clara traced the letters with trembling fingers, her heart quickening. Once, she would have dismissed the idea as impossible. Now, she saw an invitation, a horizon waiting to be reached. At the studio that evening, she showed the flyer to Michael and David. Michael's approving nod filled her with courage, his voice calm and steady. You're ready, he said, as though it were a fact. David grinned and teased that the worst that could happen was a bad dance and good food. Clara laughed, her decision already made. In the weeks leading up to the festival, Clara noticed subtle changes in herself. Her posture was taller, her steps lighter, her confidence steadier. She practiced at home, marking spaces on the floor with tape. What once felt like awkward rehearsals now felt like preparation for something joyful. Each day added strength to her resolve. Doubt still visited, whispering she was too old to begin anew. One evening, after stumbling through practice, she felt fear creeping back. But instead of surrendering, she opened her journal. I'm not proving anything, she wrote. I'm choosing. The words felt like armor, steadying her trembling heart. When the day of the festival arrived, excitement mingled with nerves. Clara traveled with David and Elaine, their chatter filling the train with warmth. Registration lines bustled with dancers of every age and style. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like an outsider. She felt part of something alive, something bigger than herself. The first workshop was simple but profound. Think of dance as conversation, not performance, the instructor said. Clara let the idea guide her movements, her body softening. When she faltered, she no longer apologized. Instead, she breathed and began again. To her surprise, others smiled and encouraged her, as if she belonged. That evening, she stepped onto the open floor, heart racing but steady. The music flowed, and she allowed it to carry her forward. David's presence beside her was steady, guiding without control. Mistakes still happened, but they no longer defined her. For the first time, she felt not only alive but free. Later, in the hotel room, Clara sat with her journal once more. Her words poured easily, filling page after page. The festival wasn't about proving myself, she wrote. It was about finding myself. She realized her life didn't end with loss, nor with fear. It began anew each time she chose to dance. That night, Clara drifted to sleep with calm in her chest. Tomorrow would bring ordinary routines, yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. She carried within her a new rhythm, steady and alive. Life was no longer something to endure, it was something to embrace. And Clara knew she was ready to keep moving forward.